for another wonderful video.
Would you like Hardy's books or Hardy's books?
I'll have Hardy's books, please.
There you go.
Cheers.
Cheers. Hello and welcome back to Hardy's Books.
My name's Laura.
My name is Ross.
And today we are talking about a topic that we touched on in passing, but that is very dear to Ross. Indeed.
It is my sincere, overwhelming love for the work of Susanna Clarke, specifically Jonathan Strange Mr Norrell. And as you can see, I have a problem.
Yeah.
It's one of those books that I loved so much that I had to hoard every single copy I could find of
Like
it.
Smaug.
Well, more like Mr Norrell, as we'll talk about later. So sorry if you can't find one. Anyway,
They're all here.
They're all here.
So why are we talking about Jonathan Strange?
Well, Laura, today, as this video goes live, we're kicking off the first community book club that we're doing on the channel, and that is for this specific book, because it is the 20th anniversary this year of Jonathan Strange Mr Norrell, and a lot of people find it very intimidating to read. So I thought, let's do a little book club for it, let's read it together, and hopefully today I can convince you why you should read this book with me.
I've not read it.
Yeah, which was a surprise to me. I know you'd read some of it.
I read some of it.
Yeah.
I didn't finish it.
It is a big book.
It's a big book.
I think that's kind of the main problem that people have with it, is they look at it and they go, gosh, that's a lot of book. That is like that is a dense book right there, you know.
Hench?
Yeah.
It's like dense and hench.
Yeah.
Is that a real word?
It is now.
So people feel intimidated by it.
Yeah, I think so. And so I wanted to help you. If you've thought about this book, if you've seen it on the shelf and thought, that looks interesting, but too big, then today I want to give you some idea of what is inside this amazing novel to help you decide whether or not you want to read it. And I'm hoping that you'll say, yes, I do want to read it.
And if you do decide that you want to read it, then we are here to hold your hand along the way. It'll be my first time reading it all the way through as well, hopefully. I'll be there alongside you with Ross's guiding light. Guiding the guidance.
Why does this sound like Narnia? Let's get into this, because we have rambled long enough. Let's talk about the book, right?
Yeah. So to give us a brief pressy, what is Jonathan Strange and Mr Norrell?
Okay, so primarily this is the work of alternative history. So it takes place at the early 1800s in England. It is in the middle of the Napoleonic Wars. So all of the context that comes with that. Imagine society looking as you would imagine it to look then, with the addition of the fact that 400 years ago, magic was incredibly prevalent in England, and there were practitioners of it, and it's fallen off.
400 years prior to the book or prior to us?
400 years prior to us, so it'd be 200 years prior to the book. But then there was the peak of magic during the Orient Magicians. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. At the start of this book, we meet Mr Norrell, who is a character who you will grow to despise and also find incredibly interesting. And Mr Norrell is the one person in England who is basically hoarding all of the books of magic that are out there, all the historical tomes. And there's a distinction between books of magic and books about magic. And so he is basically the Smaug figure that has all of these books. His library, there are rumours of his library at Hertview Abbey. That's two gentlemen magicians, specifically theoretical magicians from York, go in order to find out more about Mr Norrell and more about his library. And the book evolves into Mr Norrell hearkening the return of English magic to England.
Wow.
Yes. So we see this very flawed character being at the centre of this revival, and the student that he makes along the way, and their burgeoning rivalry, and all of the threats and all of the various magical intrigue that evolves as due to that. So this book is called Jonathan Strange and Mr Norrell. Now I'm going to tell you right off the bat, Jonathan Strange doesn't come in until part 2. So it's split into 3 parts.
Okay.
You will hear the name Strange throughout the first part, but he doesn't actually really have a point of view moment until part 2. So the first third is about Mr Norrell and the return of English magic and the way that is used in the war efforts and things like that. The second part is about Jonathan Strange, and in the third part, I won't tell you anything about, because I think it's better arrived at by oneself.
Well, I'm intrigued.
I'm very glad you're intrigued, Laura. I hope you're intrigued too.
What is it that you, in particular, love about this book?
For a book this long, bearing in mind it's, I think, about 310,000 words.
Whoa!
Which puts it up there with some of the longer books in fantasy. Not quite a Brandon Sanderson, but the difference is that prose is quite dense in this compared to Sanderson, which eyes can just skim over. But because this is written in a style that is, you could almost call it a pastiche of 19th century literature. So Susanna Clarke's choice of words, her turn of phrase, is all designed to give the story some sense of historicity, some sense of verisimilitude, one of my favourite words, truthiness, basically, so that it feels like some found literature that we could discover today that would tell the story of these two magicians at the start of the 19th century. So it feels like it's an actual real book that is telling history because the style is so exact. And that, again, that's what makes it such an impressive piece of work. It's so long, and yet it never loses its execution at any point throughout. She is so consistent throughout this book, and I think it took her, like, it was one of those books that, like, you hear about the artist who ruins their mental health in the process of doing their magnum opus. This is that book. You know, Susanna Clarke it made her quite ill to write Jonathan Strange.
Really?
Yeah, it really did. So
wow.
Her entire self was born into this book. So yes, it is exactly pitch perfect style. Of course, it happening in the early 1800s, if you're familiar with that point of history, in British history specifically, you'll encounter a number of cameos from some of the most interesting and kind of wonderful characters of history of that point. So Napoleon.
Oh, I didn't realise Napoleon was actually.
Napoleon is, well, name checks.
Oh. I thought he was actually in it.
Well, I mean, he is, in passing, again, lots of cameos, but then also some characters are given real, like, dialogue and page time. So, like, Lord Byron, for instance. So
that's fun.
Mad King George.
I was going to say, is King George in it?
King George is in it.
Mary Shelley?
Mary Shelley is referred to.
Ooh, that's fun.
Yeah, you get the Duke of Wellington.
Ooh.
You know, you get all these characters who you've heard so much about if you've read the history, and then to get to see them on the page, living, being, you know, inhabiting the same world as these two very interesting magicians, I think is just brilliant. So well done. It's a real Easter egg for those who enjoy their history, and also those who enjoy their Victoriana, their kind of Georgian literature. The characters as well. I mentioned those characters as, you know, the real life characters that are really well drawn and have great cameos, but also Jonathan Strange and Mr Norrell themselves. And the third main character of the piece, who is the gentleman with the thistledown hair, who is a fairy.
Ooh.
I'm trying not to go too deep into what the roles of these characters are, but I will just say that they are so vividly imagined that they don't necessarily do the obvious things, that they are flawed characters, but not in a way that's edgy. It's in a way that's realistic.
I'm assuming he's not a fairy in, like, the Tinkerbell sense.
No. There are no little kind of small tooth fairy individuals, you know, waving their little wands. It's all very grown up. It's also very based in folklore.
Oh, I love that.
So, like, it's not the kind of fairy that flies around in the garden that Arthur Conan Doyle would want to take photos of. It's the kind of fairy that would spirit your child away from your medieval village home. And it's that kind of folklorish element. It goes really deep into the folklore as well. Like, you know, the kind of fairy tales that we have in our non-magical world, but imagine the kind of fairy tales that would exist in a world that believes in magic because magic is real. So there are these stories that are handed down from the past about the adventures of magicians who were real people.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Oh, nom 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 nom.
Not only that,
I'm excited now.
this book has a love of books. So
The bibliophiles out there.
for the bibliophiles out there, one of the things I really appreciate is Mr Norrell's library. It plays into the mindset of the bibliophile, of the book collector, of the dragon hoard book kind of person, like us, essentially. So, you know, that kind of mindset is prevalent throughout the book. You know, there's the publisher, Jonathan Murray, is in it, and he's publishing a book, and he talks about the second edition and all those kinds of things. So it really is very relatable for book enthusiasts. Not only that, so I'm going to keep going on about things I really like about this book. If the density of how...
asking, guys.
Yeah. You asked, I'm telling you. If the thickness of this book is scary, then think of it instead as maybe something you might want to try the audiobook of, because it's only a 32-hour audiobook, which is the same length as, like, The Blade itself or whatever. It's like the same length as an Abercrombie.
Yeah, fair enough.
And it's narrated by Simon Preble, who delivers the most immaculate characterization of all these people in the book, using received pronunciation, basically inhabiting the character of people in the 19th century, and he acts all the characters so well as well. So I think that kind of sums up why I love it so much. There's a lot there to love.
Well, I was expecting a one-sentence answer.
Nope.
Okay, so why should people read it?
If that wasn't enough to convince you, first of all, the fact that it is so significant a work. The fact that it is an incredible accomplishment. I kind of touched this on already. Such a long but well executed book. It is, I think, a work of epic fantasy, if that makes any sense. Like, it's not epic fantasy in the swords and sorcery style. It's an epic fantasy in
It's epic in other senses.
In other senses, exactly. So I think everyone who has an interest in fantasy literature should probably check out the most significant books in fantasy literature to see if it's for them. Otherwise, they're kind of missing out, you know? So it behooves you to check it out to see if it is to your liking.
It does kind of touch on one thing, though, that it is not for everyone.
I think some people will find it too dense, or perhaps too slow.
Yeah.
People who are perhaps less used to reading 19th century literature might struggle with the prose style.
I've bounced off it, and I've actually read quite a lot of 19th century literature.
Yep.
I'm going to try again based on this discussion.
You already are.
Well, I was going to try again anyway because we're doing this video series.
Yeah.
The hustle never stops. I'm especially going to try again now. Yeah. But I've bounced off it once. Yeah, it's not for everybody.
No, I will admit that, which I think is natural. Like, not every book is for everyone, but the people to whom this book is for, it will be extremely for them.
Yeah.
I will say, if you feel like you need a lot of plot to happen, it doesn't rush through things. So bear that in mind, that you might need to, if you're not enjoying just soaking in the literature, then it might not be for you. Yeah,
it's not a very dewy book.
No, it's quite a heady book, quite a thinky book. What was Sam saying? What was it called?
It was dewy or thinky.
Yeah, it's a bit more of a thinky book. I will also say, it being in that style, it's a really good gateway for other authors from the era. So it might encourage you to read some Dickens. It might encourage you to read some Jane Austen. Yeah. It might encourage you to read some Bram Stoker.
Or some Mary Shelley.
Especially. And I will actually say, going into the kind of, you had this next question lined up, which are what are some comp titles? Yeah. For style, I will say that if you've read Frankenstein, if you've read Dracula, if you've read Wilkie Collins, for instance, The Woman in White, then a lot of this will feel very familiar to you. And I mean, that in itself is just so wonderful, such an achievement, that it can feel like it was written then.
Yeah.
I will, so that's kind of comparison titles for style, as well as, like, you know, if you enjoy certain kinds of plots, like the rival magicians plots, then of course, if you liked The Prestige, specifically, I've seen the film, I haven't read the book, but if you've seen the film, then you will kind of get an idea of some of the atmosphere between these two magicians. If you have read The Night Circus, which I know you've read.
I've read that. Yeah. I would say that is a much sillier book than this.
Yeah. Well, there is silly. There is some silly in this. I think, right? Yeah, I think there are some lighthearted moments, like where it kind of pokes a bit of fun of it at itself, like the gentleman with the hat.
I walked through the kitchen as Ross was listening to the audiobook and just caught a snippet of Simon Preble going, "A very important looking gentleman in a very important looking hat." And I thought,
see, it does poke fun at itself, which I think is brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. I have heard that The Golem and the Genie by Helen Wecker is a similar sort of stylistic book. Again, sort of magical alternate history kind of built into where things feel familiar but also a little bit magical. And his Dark Materials would probably slake that same thirst, you know. So I would definitely recommend those books as well, if you like this, and vice versa. If you like those books, then you will love Jonathan Strange.
Okay, so tell us about the read-along, Mr. Hardy.
So the read-along begins today. Because it's such a long book, we're going to take our time. So it ends on Halloween, so you've got 6 weeks, basically. It's going to be a nice, long, slow-paced read-along, and it's going to happen over on FABLE, So there's a link down in the description for you to join our Fable book club, and you can basically, once you go onto Fable, you can find all the chapters listed there and various check-in points along the way, and there are basically chat rooms where you can talk to each other about the book. This is not sponsored by Fable. We're actually trying it out. So we're going to have a little kind of investigation, see what Fable's like. You know, we recommended hardcover in the past. We want to try other book apps too. So for us, this is a bit of an experiment. Not sponsored in any way by Fable.
No.
But who knows? Maybe if we like it, we might shill for them. Too. The first week is only going to be 3 chapters, and then the next week is a bit more. And so it kind of, by that point, you should hopefully be into it and enjoying it. So there we go. So finishes Halloween. So you got a long old time to read it.
Are you going to be doing any videos along the way?
Yes, I am going to do some videos at those check-in points.
Okay.
Just to talk about the bits that just happened, maybe help contextualize some things to help you know what's important to bring forward. If it's kind of, there's a lot of density in there, so some of it is irrelevant, there are long footnotes, some of it is very relevant, so it's quite difficult to work out what's important. Not as confusing as Malazan, let me say, but I can understand why people might feel a bit kind of, you know, wary, baffled, and so that's what those videos are designed to do, just to give you a bit of guidance as we go through. So,
and if I'm still reading, which I intend to be, I may join those.
Excellent.
But I don't think they'll be on the main feed, will they?
No, they're not going to be on the main feed. They're going to be exclusive to Fable. So check them out there.
Let us know your thoughts. Have you read Jonathan Strange and Mr Norrell? Are you planning to? Are you going to join our read-along?
If you've read Jonathan Strange and Mr Norrell, maybe get down in the comments and let us know what your thoughts were about it. But be gentle, because, and I'm not exaggerating to say this is my favourite book. So please
be kind.
Be kind, as always, in the comments. I know you all are. So be kind to each other and respect each other's opinions. And so thank you very much. We're going to be over on Instagram too. So we're on Instagram at Hardy's Books. I'm making a special concerted effort to build our presence over there. So I've been posting every day. So if you did want to give us a follow over on Hardy's Books on Instagram, I would be appreciative. We have a shop. I don't know if we've mentioned that in this video. www.hardysbooks.co.uk for some beautiful signed /special /first editions. And I think that's everything. I think that's it. Thank you everyone for watching, and we'll catch you at the book club.